Hello and welcome to episode 18 of Hearthbound, the nerdy book club podcast where three lifelong friends set out on a virtual quest through the pages of iconic book series, all while celebrating every reluctant, you were right, Sean, with a shot of the closest whiskey. My name is Lou Chapman, and I'm accompanied by Matt Mullen and Sean Martz, the Kirk and Spock to my McCoy. In this episode, we continue our journey into the thickening plot of Dune. Before we get started, a quick apology for the audio quality on the next few episodes. Moving into a new house means you have to set up your recording studio on the fly. I promise I'll be back to my silky smooth and high-pitched laughs in no time. Without further ado, go pour the darkest draft, get under the heated blanket, and go buy another cord of firewood, because this is Hearthbound.
We're back.
We're
back.
Been done.
A lot of things have happened.
A lot of things have happened.
The Dune movie.
Yeah, the Dune movie has come out. But more importantly, what has happened in Dune? That's what we are here to talk about. Is it not?
It is.
It is. The book.
I really want to watch the movie, though.
I know.
Did you bring it up?
I know. He had to go ahead and bring it up right out of the gate. Just
it's like, hey, guys, that movie just came out.
Okay,
let's
and also
not watch it.
We have it, but we can't watch it until we finish doing the book. And then, what do you guys think about doing the movie episode?
Absolutely.
That'd be fun.
All for it.
I'm in.
But I'm curious, and maybe someone can anonymously help us with this. Do we just need to finish this book? Do we need to finish the 3 books? Where do we need to?
A little bird told me that the movie only covers book 1.
Perfect.
So,
and then I read today that the HBO overlords, whoever controls their decisions, has already greenlit number 2 to start production. So we'll be riding the Dune train for quite a while, it seems. But I'm here for it if y'all are here for it.
Sold.
I'm in.
I
am in.
So where are we at in the book? The last thing I remember was Paul was training with the guy, Master Potatoes.
I remember the main character is in the story.
Paul was training with the Master of Potatoes.
No, he was not training with Duncan, Idaho. He was training with
Duncan,
Yui.
Idaho was on his own little mission.
Or no, not Yui, Howitt. Howitt.
He was already
Thafir
on
Howitt. Okay. So he was training, and then you know what? He met up with Yui somehow, or Yui met him, and he gave him an orange Catholic Bible.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and this was the move, an ironic move, because he is ultimately going to betray Paul and the Duke and the whole Atreides family. And I think I finally am saying Atreides correct. I think that is actually their family name. So
cool.
Good job.
I was listening to older episodes. I'm like, we should have just Googled it.
So the guy who betrays a family gives the book on morality, the Orange Catholic Bible.
He gives it to clear his conscience, essentially.
Oh.
Right? I mean, that's what we kind of came to the conclusion is that, he's doing this because he already feels guilty about what he's about to do. And kind of re-listening to some of the episodes, I think we also kind of keep we messed up the little snippets in the start. They're definitely future excerpts from what's about to happen, like in the Witcher series. Yes,
which means Sean was right.
Sean is making very inappropriate gestures. I apologize in advance for any visual.
So speaking, okay, so real quick, this upcoming chapter we have Paul meeting with his father, And I think we can dive in right there because the excerpt says Muad'Dib's father. And I don't know if it just clicked for you guys, but that means that Paul's Muad'Dib.
Yes.
Yes, and dude, back to the Paul is a dumb name conversation. Why wouldn't you just, you are Muad'Dib? Is that like the guy? Like they were talking about with like Jessica and the Benny Gesserit,
okay.
Like male.
That was my thing.
Super
I had to go
Saiyan
back
or
and look that up. It's like the balance of the force, right? It's the person who brings the both sides of the yin and the yang.
The chosen one.
I don't think it is.
Pretty good. That was really good.
That was really good. I'm gonna clip that later and put the video behind that.
I know. He is not. That is the Kwisatz Haderach. I just looked it up.
All right.
Okay.
I think I'm just sick enough to get the Obi-Wan voice down. I got like a mild cold. So randomly, I'm just going to spurt out some like Obi-Wan lines. That's not happening.
But yes, the excerpt predicted, or not predicted, because it's talking about, it's a history book, right? So it talks about the Muad'Dib, which through context clues we can get is Paul. And this one talks about, I forget what this first one talks about specifically, but I know it makes that connection. And then enter Duke Leto, his dad, who has been described as like, I don't know about you guys, but like I got kind of I'm going to bring it back to Game of Thrones, but I got like the Bolton dad, I forget his first name, but like, slim.
Ramsay Bolton.
No, not Ramsay, his dad. I forget his name. But like that slim, grayish skin, or not grayish skin, but grayish eyes, and Duke Leto has like olive skin, taunt, and like in another part they describe him as like hawkish features, and then he has this.
They
like,
make
black
him sound
armor.
like a dilf. That is what. In my mind, they just made this guy sound like daddy material. And it's like, hey, that's the Duke. He's got it going on.
But then, they proceed
Matt, make sure,
to
make sure we mark this one as explicit.
Yes.
Release.
Well, what's wrong with DILF? I mean, it's you fill in your own acronym there, listener.
Dad, I'd like to friendship. What's your problem, Sean?
Oh, Dad, I'd like to fight, personally, is mine. Because, honestly, he kind of sounds like a cocky asshole as this... Oh, shit. Oh, there it goes. My bad. As this little chapter goes on, and he kind of they're talking about, Paul and the Duke are talking about the plan and about what they're going to be doing and everything that's going to happen in the next couple of weeks, as many of the characters have been talking about so far this book. And the Duke's kind of having a little pump up party for himself. He's talking about how good of a son Paul is and how, proud he is that he's so educated. And then he's talking about how they know that the Duke knows that they're walking into this trap that Paul's been told about, right? And I don't know about you guys. I just got the sense that he's just a little full of himself. Anybody else feel that way?
I think especially because the chapter or section just kind of opens up with obviously the Duke's walking into the training room where Paul is, and he just radiates that cockiness immediately. And as he's described, he's just like a manly man, and he's a leader, and he's very overconfident in the way that he rules and then what he's going to be able to accomplish. So in the last couple sections, I was freaking out because I'm like, why isn't anyone just telling the Duke, hey, ambush? Possibly something bad's going to happen. But he's so unworried about it, and they did tell him, or he knows already. And it just gives that vibe of, well, Paul, don't sweat it. And Paul really wants to tell him, and he has this itching feeling inside of him. He's like, should I tell him? Is it even worth my time? And the Duke's like, oh, yeah, I know that they're going to try something slimy, but we got this. I have everything under control. I've already sent squads in there to kind of map everything out and, set some seeds, plant some almost traps of his own. And from there, it's just, more cockiness and very overconfidence, if you will.
Interesting. I didn't get that he was...
Sean looks upset.
He was cocky. I got that he was confident in... Because they were talking about basically the Duke knows he's walking into a trap. And instead of just naively walking into the trap and hoping for the best, he's making moves and he's trying his best to make sure that his family is going to be safe, right? So he sent. We find out a little bit about the politics of this planet. That primarily it's governed by spice, right? So Arrakis is one of the main places where spice is mined, and we find that spice has an anti-aging property. So it's kind of like a little bit of fountain of youth. Lou, you look confused.
I didn't pick up on that. I must have just brain skipped over that.
Oh yeah, so it's just this
I didn't catch that either.
One line, and this is actually my I can talk really good.
He's only had 4 beers, people.
Jeez.
Let's get it started.
This is actually my what's the word?
Vocab?
Guys,
Yes!
Sean's
yes!
broken.
Oh my gosh, people. Holy cow.
Goodness. Wow. Okay. So we find out that spice actually has a little bit of anti-aging property because they're talking about it, how it can't be manufactured. It has to be mined on Arrakis, and they say it has geriatric properties. And so I guess that's what I read from it. Geriatric just means aging. So
like
it has
geriatric?
Yes. Sorry. Did I say that wrong?
I just got.
I mean, you kind of just made fun of everybody named. Yeah, just made fun of everybody named Gary, but that's no big deal. I guess geriatric properties.
You just said an age to that name.
Okay, but what happens here is that the Duke extrapolates a lot of things, and he says, "Hey, spice is the big thing in the universe, right? Like, it's the most important thing. This is kind of what we're getting at. We're gonna come in, right? And that means that anybody who is allied with the Harkonnens and knows that I'm taking over this planet." They've been stockpiling spice because they know that like Arrakis is about to get really unstable. So anyone who's not affected by this supply chain interruption, we know was already in on the plans to obviously to kill us.
Yeah. Yeah, I picked up on that too.
This other note that I have is that Paul says this thing about being taught by, like, first he was trained by Gurney, who's like his best friend. It seems that they just have a lot. He can almost open up to him like an uncle, like that cool uncle that comes over, brings a guitar and like a bunch of weapons, and he's like, "Dude, let's just get crazy. Like, no one's around. Have a beer." But he says something, and it's on this page. I don't know if he's referring to Gurney, but I think so. You guys will have to back me up. But he says that he liked that the teacher was totally there. And I was like, can you, like, back in school, have you ever thought of like one of your teachers and been like, they were totally there for you and for the kids? Like, not just, this is my job, I got to show up. But as a teacher, I would have loved to know that all my students were like totally there. As like Paul was totally there. He can tell that, like, I feel everyone in this family is just very attentive when, you know, someone's talking or someone's explaining something. I just imagine Paul like laser vision on his dad, like drinking every word in precisely, taking the time to process it, and then just responding without emotion, which will come into play later.
I got that feeling too. I forget the exact phrase that they use, but they're talking about this plan and what the Duke's like counter plan to the plan is and things like that. And Paul says something along the lines of like, he felt a revelation coming in the conversation. So you can tell that he's like almost hanging on every word from his dad, right?
Yeah. Oh, and I screwed that up. I just looked in the book. It's actually his dad, who he said is like, his presence just makes him seem like somebody who's totally here in the moment. Like, but he's so smart. He knows like everything that's going on and like kind of puts Paul's mind at ease.
And he's so smart, and kind of continuing on this little section, he's so smart that we finally figure out what a mentat is. In the last episodes, we've kind of struggled with this idea of, you know, what it is, are they human, are they not, and stuff like that. And we find out that Paul is revealed through his dad that he has been undergoing mentat training. And even after gets told this, he's like, well, no, I thought mentats couldn't be told that they were going under mentat training because it would, hinder their ability or it would ruin the process. And his dad's like, well, eventually, they have to, be told and have to make the decision to keep going or not. And, the author does a really good job of like that mental click of like, oh, holy cow, these past 12 years of my life make sense now. And he talks about how they use a really good word where it's like, I forget the exact phrase. I wish I would have wrote it down, but it was something along the lines of Paul, instead of thinking something, he made a calculation. And they only use the word calculation after they mention that he's been training as a mentat. And I thought that was a really clever little trick and helps the reader also make that click.
So I didn't think that he was currently training as a mentat. I thought that, they just found out, like, hey, you have the capability to be one and you can start your training.
No, I took it as, Matt can be the deciding factor here, but I took it as you've been training. We just never told you because you're not supposed to know that you're training for it until you hit a certain age or a certain whatever, and then you have to make the logical decision or the conscious decision, rather, to continue on the training.
Yeah, they kind of made it sound like especially with Bene Gesserit upbringing, if you were a guy, it was kind of like in the Bene Gesserits, they talked about how the women were the one who like knew all the history of women for, centuries, like all the way back. But like if you were a guy, you were either like this awesome Kwisatz Haderach or whatever, or you were just like normal. Like you could be a mentat. Yeah, you could be trained to be a mentat, but it was like something that the Bene Gesserit specifically did to boys, because it's like, well, you're not going to be the super awesome woman who can look to the past, so we're just going to make you a human computer that is like ultra smart. So he didn't get the actual training for mentat, but they were preparing him for it. Like he has the choice, like what he wants to do with it, which is kind of what the Duke lays into his lap. But we kind of steamrolled right through, and I hate to keep, especially after I called him a DILF, but I hate to go back to the appearance of the Duke at the beginning, but there was a word that I didn't know, and this is going to kick off something new that we're doing with our vocab, which is kind of nice because we have consistently neglected our beer choices and our drink choices when we are going through this, our shenanigans. But the first word in our vocab flight tonight in beer is patina.
Oh, that was going to be a lot louder in my mind.
It's all right. We tried. There was
maybe if I do this.
It was there.
No, it doesn't make any noise too. Yeah, Matthew and I both chose the word patina, but he let me talk about it. Patina is essentially what happens to copper when it oxidizes. So think Statue of Liberty, that greenish, hueish color. That's essentially that process and that color, or that film that's on top of the copper once it oxidizes. Correct, Sean?
Yes.
Approval from the House Nerd. And the beer that I'm adding to the flight is Great Lakes Oktoberfest, as it is nearing the end of October and spooky season. I figured what a great glass to finish off spooky season and get ready for Fatsgiving.
Hell yeah. But yeah, this description of the word patina was about the Duke's belt, which they kind of drew a lot of attention to what he's wearing. So it's beyond just like how smart is this guy in this section. It's just like he is not just wearing like casual house clothes anywhere. It's armor. He's ready to go at any given time. He's got his old trusty, Statue of Liberty belt strapped on. And this is like, for me, I just put old trusty.
Old rusty trusty.
These are those shield belts that they were referred to. And like, I know they said always keep your shield charged and things like that. And I feel like the Duke is literally the embodiment of what Gurney has been training Paul to be in terms of a fighter. So you have that in the last couple sections, and then you see it like the expectation of where the bar is with the Duke. So yeah, and then we go into the explanations. Sean, you talked about the Chome Company and how they kind of rock the spice trade. Like, even though everyone's stockpiling it, it's like through them. Like, it's their baby. The one thing that I was blown away about is like they trade more than like the spice. They're responsible for trading all kinds of things, including sharks. Did anyone catch that?
Yeah, there was like a bunch of random stuff: wood, sharks,
logs, donkeys, horses, cows, lumber, dung, sharks, whale fur.
Yeah, I was like
all sorts of stuff.
And at this point, this is where something else cockiness from the Duke kind of came from, and I was like, the Duke he almost struck out in feminist baseball when he was talking about like women's roles in like raising kids or like in society and things like that, and all the worry that was instilled in Paul by the Reverend Mother and his own mom were kind of rooted in that Bene Gesserit belief, but then the Duke just kind of like shits all over it.
He's just like, yeah, don't worry, that's all. Women don't want people that they love to be in harm's way, and you're just like,
he's like, don't. The quote I pulled was, "Don't let a woman's fears cloud your mind." I'm like, strike one. The count is 1-0. Like, he's in trouble.
This was written in the 50s.
True. But he attempts a recovery to that statement immediately after, because I wrote that down first. I'm like, ooh. And then he returns it with, "No woman wants her loved ones endangered." And I was just like, well, everybody, I don't think, wants their loved ones.
Yeah, I was going to say, gender aside.
Yeah. I called it a ball instead of a strike.
One thing I want to touch on there, Matt, you said that they were trading in a lot of different things: logs, donkeys, horses, and I just reread it and it said dung specifically. I don't know where I got this factoid, but did you guys know that the U.S. passed a law in like the 50s, I want to say. And it was called like the Guano Act. And basically it was a law that said that we can claim any islands that nobody else has claimed and use military force in order to protect the guano deposits on there, because we want guano. And for people who don't know, guano is bat poop.
If you've ever seen Ace Ventura, you know what guano is.
What?
Yeah. I wanted to...
Poop?
Yep, I had to look it up real quick to verify. It's called the Guano Islands Act. I'll drop it in the chat that we're listening to right now, and we'll include a link to it in the show notes. Boom.
Says the guy that never puts show notes together.
And Lou will drop a link to it in the show notes.
Gonna create work for everyone else.
So, along that line, then, it seems like we're starting to get this kind of theme, imperial colonialism kind of vibe going.
I would agree.
Colonialism, exploitation of natural resources, especially and we'll get into this in the next chapter, but on Arrakis, water is super scarce, right? So it's this natural resource, and it doesn't seem like if you're rich, you're having a problem with water, but it seems like if you're poor, you're having a really big problem with water.
Yeah, and this was one of the things before I even started this book with you guys that I looked into, is that it's not just this Lord of the Rings in space story. It has a lot of backing with like environmental issues that are happening in society, and it kind of like also resonates with things that are still going on. Like this problem that he's writing about is still like an issue, which was kind of cool that it even something that has, don't let a woman's fears cloud your mind, is also like, hey, the environment, this is what's going to happen if you're robbing it of all the things, including the sharks and the dung. And I'm calling BS on the dung. Guano.
Guano.
It's right there. It's right there.
I mean, I believe it, but the smell test is telling me you could pretty much lay claim to every island and on the planet then. But kind of going back to what Sean was talking about with the shipping and the different companies, one of the things that I picked up in this little bit too was we get a little bit of insight into long or extended space travel, and it seems to me that this guild, I forget the name of it off the top of my head, unfortunately, but this guild is responsible for all space traffic, planetary traffic, essentially. And they use giant ships that you put your ship inside of to safely cross the galaxies. And I thought, what an interesting way to, efficiently, I don't know, maybe, would that be a more efficient way to travel across space? Is to put, instead of just having every ship have its own little engine and things like that, let's just put all the ships in one ship and then move it all across the world or galaxy.
Yeah, it's like super Star Wars. Like they have those giant Imperial, ships, and then they have the docks, the bays for all those like fighters or transports or whatever. But I feel like that's kind of what everyone's trying to do now. It's like, how are we going to get all this stuff essentially somewhere else? And they're like, let's just build a big massive thing out in space and then, kind of park our cars in it.
It was kind of like a John Wick, like no business on company grounds, right? Or continental grounds, right? No business on continental grounds. So they talked about it, and he's like, hey, if we use the guild to transport our stuff, we're guaranteed security. Like, the Harkonnens could be right next to us, and nothing's going to happen. We're guaranteed security, but, like, you pay for that price. You pay for that luxury. You pay the price for that luxury.
You pay for that price. Is that like a Costco membership?
Exactly. And then a couple other things that we learned about in this chapter as we're wrapping this up. So we learned that the Duke is trying to make friends with the Fremen, who are one of the natural
native
population on the planet of Arrakis. We also learned that the Emperor has his own like King's Guard, its own Imperial Guard kind of thing, called the Sara Dukar. Did I say that right?
Yeah, you said that right. And also they use the abbreviation SS, which in 1950s I think is like a pretty much dead giveaway that bad people, right? That's synonymous nowadays.
Yeah, so that was because they came from the planet of Salusa Secundus.
Mm-hmm.
And
a prison planet, nonetheless.
Prison planet,
which sounded like a Harry Potter character to me.
Ooh, okay.
Or spell.
It sounds more like a spell.
Secundus.
Yeah, that sounds definitely like a spell.
What happens?
I had a little.
I think you implode on yourself, like you just go through your own mouth.
You become a black hole. Just go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a note that this was the. I feel like Star Wars is basically just Dune remastered, because this was like the clone planet, right? They're talking about this
hired guns,
Salusa Secundus, and they're like, well, have you ever seen it? Like, do you know anybody who's ever been there or ever heard of it? And so that's kind of what I feel like, at least Star Wars kind of has that same theme of like, oh yeah, there was this hidden planet that nobody knew about, but we also mapped every other planet in the universe except this, single planet, where, by the way, they created a clone army.
My only point to that is that in Star Wars, the troopers, aka the clones, are really horrible shots. They cannot hit anything. But these guys, they pumped them up as like they train in hell.
Mm-hmm.
Like, these guys are hired guns. They have no alliance to anyone but themselves, but they will be bought. They will, kind of do their thing. What was that? Game of Thrones.
The Golden Company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But not just them. Like when Khaleesi went with her dragons when they were little, she got all those.
Oh.
They
were the eunuchs. Like you buy them and they're like
the Unsullied.
Yeah, the Unsullied.
Yes, I could not think of the word, but kind of like that. Like, they are murder machines, and they can be bought, but they don't have an alliance, which is really sketchy for being somebody who is like, well, we can, we have access to these guys. It's like, that sounds like a last resort.
I took them a little differently. I took them as prisoners that were indoctrinated. There's a $7 word for you. Indoctrinated into fighting for the Emperor. Like, they were talking about, when listening to it, it sounded like what was the name of the company or the soldiers? I forget the name already.
Sarah Dakar.
Sarah Dakar. I think it's Sarah Dakar. But anyway, everyone was like, oh, it's just the levies that, the emperor calls in, like calling his banners in or calling, the banners to send men. But everyone's kind of like, but our populations aren't changing. He's not asking for more soldiers from us. So where are all these men coming from? So to me, it sounded like they were just using prisoners and they were indoctrinating them. And even Paul brings up, when his dad brings it up to him, he says, well, how could someone that you force into fighting for you have any kind of loyalty? And he goes, well, there's proven ways. You play on their curiosity for superstition and, mystery and things like that. And he talks about how it's been done over and over. And then all of that to point to, it clicks in Paul's mind that's like, oh, the Fremen. And he kind of realizes, you being the Duke here, you plan on doing this to the Fremen. You want to mobilize, to weaponize the Fremen against the Harkonnens and anyone else that would try to halt the spice production or the spice mining. Because that's kind of the whole overarching trap here, is that the Harkonnens are setting up this beautiful trap for Leto to walk into and then cut off production. And, chaos ensues. The price of spice goes through the roof, and everybody that's on the planet that has its stockpiled is going to make a killing. I'm rambling, so guys agree, guys disagree?
After this is explained to Paul, he definitely feels a lot better than he did at the beginning of the conversation, because the Duke makes it sound like, how would they not back us if we take care of them? Like, it's not going to be hard to treat them better than the Harkonnens have.
Exactly.
Like, they just kill people for fun. Like, they don't care.
Yeah, they talk about how they hunt them for sport.
Yeah. So it's like, it's not going to be a hard thing to attain their loyalty, which Paul, the cool thing about Paul is, despite him being 15, he is like clapping back with so many good questions about, like, what if this happens? And it's not just like a random what if. It's like a really laser specific thing. Like, how can you trust them to do what you want them to do when they are literally known as these unloyal
exactly
people?
How can you ensure the loyalty of men, right? Like, what 12-year-old asks that question? Like, hey, how do you ensure that these people are loyal to you? And like, so he's not a normal 12-year-old, right? He's definitely the Duke's son. He's definitely being queued up, right? He's definitely not. He's Muad'Dib.
Yeah. And this is kind of like what Duncan, Idaho, but I wrote down as Duncan the Moral, because they kind of send him in ahead because he's very level-headed but very stern. And
I think, something along the lines of
the Onion Knight.
Yes, exactly. Very hostile and rough, but values the truth.
Yeah, so he sends him to Arrakis ahead of time to kind of already start building the relationships. And they're like, he said, I don't trust anyone else with this job but Duncan to carry this out. And I thought that was awesome. And point after point that the Duke makes, it even makes us as the reader feel like nothing bad's going to happen, because the Duke's like, I have not just first and second base covered, but the whole damn field. Like, I got this. Like, nothing is going to happen. So it kind of returns us to that state of, like, who do we believe? The Bene Gesserit seers of the future, or the Duke, who has literally taken what he's learned, like, about this future, this problem that is going to happen, and then, like, try to make sure in every facet that it doesn't happen. So it's really awesome. Wow, really awesome part of the story here.
Yeah, it was a lot packed into a relatively short chapter. But I have one question. This is set in the future, right? Because space travel. Why is it that we haven't seen any mention of lasers, like with the Clone Wars? Like the laser guns, like terrible shots?
I want blasters.
Right, yeah, exactly. I want freaking sharks with freaking laser beams on their heads.
Shield belts. It's pretty sweet.
They have the shield belts.
Yeah, but they haven't really mentioned any kind of firearms, right?
Everything is cloak and dagger. Everything is knife and up close and personal.
that is interesting. Damn it.
Oh. So this is about the
interesting
the
is a
end of the
drinking word Lou now needs to drink.
This is at near the end of this section, and I know we want to move on to the next one, which isn't too long. There's kind of a lot that happens. We are finally introduced to Paul's somewhat background training of being a mentat, and in the last episode, we kind of left it on a cliffhanger. Lou already kind of knew, but Sean and I were in disagreement of what a mentat was. And just to clarify, that is my vocab flight word of the episode. Is mentat, and I'm drinking a Sam Adams Jacko Pumpkin Ale.
That sounds so good right now, too.
It is really good. Just in time for the end of spooky season, as Lou said. This is the wiki. Sci-fi wiki is a fictional profession or discipline in which humans are trained to mimic computers. Human minds develop to staggering heights of cognitive and analytical ability. So they are human beings, but they literally, their minds are elevated to the point of just computing instead of like thinking. And feeling.
So it's kind of this, don't tell me the odds, I know the odds kind of deal.
Yeah, kind of like Spock meets Limitless, if anybody has seen that movie too. That's kind of the feeling I get, at least. Because he still has some emotion, and he can worry, so he's not completely devoid of that kind of emotion, but his analytical abilities have been heightened. And perception, right? They talk a lot about how he sees and pays attention to very, very minute details that a normal person might just pass. So now that we've kind of gone through most of the parts of this section, I'm curious as to what your guys' thoughts are on the hero or the protagonist and the antagonist of this story. Originally I was like, oh, it's obviously Paul, and it's going to be whatever the Harkonnen guy's name, right? Obviously, protagonist, antagonist.
The Baron.
But as I'm reading and learning more about this world, to me, it seems much more complicated. I'm having a hard time of figuring out who to root for. Originally, I was feeling sympathy for Duke Leto because he's walking into a trap. But like I said at the start, I think he's kind of cocky right now. I'm not saying he deserves what he's going to get, but I'm not really rooting for him or against him. Kind of whatever happens, happens there, my guy. I don't really care. And even Paul now, I'm kind of thinking he's more of just, going to be the main string through this story, and there's going to be heroes and villains to come and go. What do you guys think about it so far?
Matt, how many pages are we in right now? Can you
in
roughly
my version?
Yeah, because you have the print book.
It's page 71. I mean, we're only 71 pages in, and
I think
I can't really answer it. What do you think, Sean?
I was gonna say I think I agree with you, Lou. I think that I think the reason that it's so popular is that it's not such a simple story, right? Just like Game of Thrones, there are people you love to hate. There's people that you hate to love. There's these characters, and I think there's going to be some plot development, some character development, and some character arcs that you're going to be really sad to see people go. I don't think it's as simple as modern storytelling, right? I think this guy thought about this a lot. Frank Herbert, he probably thought about this a lot. I mean, he made up his own universe, right? That's pretty darn impressive. He made up his own universe, and he's building up these characters, and he's building up these religions, and he's building up these companies, he's building up these houses, and all of them have a history associated with them, and all of them have these little intricate details. I'm impressed. I'm really impressed that I'm rooting for Paul, but that's because I know he's the main person in the story. But I'm equally as invested in what's going to happen to Jessica, what's going to happen to the Duke, whether the Baron's going to be mildly successful as a smart bad guy. All of these different things, what's going to happen? I'm absolutely 100% in.
And you're sure we can't watch the movie?
You know what? I think it would ruin it. I really do.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. All right, Matt, any thoughts?
Yeah, so I kind of am going to combine two things here. I don't know why we didn't talk about this before, but just at the end of this section, there's a reference to Gurney, who we know as the coolest uncle, seemingly guy of all time. Not Paul's actual uncle, but it's just like this cool dude he hangs out with that is also really good with weapons and guitar, strings, some kind of instrument. But he says this, and I'm just going to call this the fire quote of this chapter. And this does not translate to the bedroom, so don't take this out of context. But he said, there is no artistry in killing with the tip. It should be done with the edge. So I can see Lou laughing, but I can't hear him laughing.
I think he muted himself.
Just the
tip! Nope, he's just dying. Gurney is this character that, we've already learned a lot about, and we have some worries that he's going to, he might die just because of all this effort he's putting into getting Paul ready for the worst case scenario. And the name Gurney, like his actual spelling and everything, when you look it up, and you can call this a vocab word if you'd like.
That's going to be my vocab word.
Sean, what are you drinking?
That's my vocab flight that I'm adding to the table. A gurney is a metal stretcher that is used to carry someone off a battlefield or wheel an injured person somewhere.
So my point, and Sean, beautifully done. What are you drinking?
Oh, I am drinking by Frothy Beard, which is a local Charleston brewery. It's called They Do Move in Herds. And it's a Jurassic Park theme IPA. Very good. Life finds a way. Or should I say spice finds a way.
Jeez, send him home. The whole reason I brought up Gurney in the first place was because this idea of something that transports patience is that I think Paul is the one we're, of course, supposed to be rooting for because he's hopefully going to be this guy. He's going to be the Neo of the story. But there are characters that are so far a little bit more interesting than Paul. Like, I'm kind of rooting against the fact that he wants to be, the Mentat training is an option for him. That sounds super horrible for a main character. It's like, you're just going to become a computer, my guy, and just kind of let him go. But I think Gurney is going to be the one that kind of transports him to, and he's at this point, he is a patient. He is like a victim of all of these different forces on him. And I think this might be digging in a little too deep, but Gurney has been the one that has trained him in all the things that are real, like the real threats, thinking on your feet, that common sense, and the things that are more important than power or the other four things that were mentioned. I can't think of them now. He is the guy who's teaching him real life skills, where his dad is just giving him the heavy theory, the heavy, this is the plan, this is the analytical side. So I think that Paul is not going to follow that, and maybe this moves into our prediction time, but I think this is going to push Paul. Something bad is going to happen, and he's going to give up on this sense of, I'm going to be a computer guy and I'm going to do something. I'm going to become the leader that I need to be. So I'm rooting for Paul, to answer your question, because I think there's going to be sacrifices made by really awesome characters to turn him into a badass. So that is what I'm pulling for. That's what I'm hoping for. And I really hope we can get it done.
I like it a lot, Matt. I'm going to add to it. My prediction then, cue prediction noise, is that Paul does not become the one to balance the force, right? He does not become the Kwisatz Haderach. I think you're right in that because one thing, I don't know that we brought it up, but the Duke basically says, hey, you've been brought up and you have the start of Mentat training, but now's the time when you need to choose. Do you want to continue and truly go into Mentat training? Because you need to really continue and make that choice for yourself. And I'll give you time if you want it, but if that's something that you want, you need to make the decision. And he doesn't hesitate, and he says, I want to do it. And the Duke's like, you know what, I think that's a good idea. I think a Mentat Duke will make a really formidable opponent. So I don't think that he goes through Mentat training. I don't think he's the one who brings balance to the Force. I think it's kind of like the Anakin Skywalker thing. He somehow goes off the rails, but I don't think that he becomes the evil character. I think there is no balance to the Force, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
So quickly, I'll finish with complete circling back into it. Agree with everything Sean just pointed out, but the last bit. I think he does become the villain.
Ooh, you think Paul becomes a villain?
I mean, subjectively, obviously, I don't think he's going to be the cause of a lot of pain in this story. Maybe, maybe not. But objectively, I kind of have, just this past section he has a choice. He can go his dad's route or he can go his own route. And it's kind of how I've envisioned it. Maybe I'm projecting a little bit there. That's kind of awkward. Either be the villain or the hero. But I love this book. I'm so into it. We're only 70 pages in. Under 100 pages. I'm sold. I cannot wait to finish this.
How many pages, Matt?
Oh, I don't know. For book one?
At least 80 pages, right?
I don't know. I'm
7.
There. Single pages?
What page number?
I couldn't find.
Go towards the end.
The front. Or I can just look.
Is
at
there
the
an
front.
index?
There is a table of contents, perhaps. So according to this, 246 pages.
Okay, so we're like a third of the way there, right? And I'm interested. I want to hear all of this book, all 3 or 4 or 5, however many there are. I'm here for it. So I'm excited.
2845 repeating.
Yeah, whatever.
According to my Mentat machine.
Yeah, whatever, Mentat. All right, listener. Well, thank you very much for joining us on this single section of Dune. We look forward to picking the conversation up quickly in the next section where we discover if any of this bullshit we've been spewing turns out to be true. But
will Paul turn into a computer man?
Matt has his work cut out for him in post.
Tune in next
time.
And join us next time.
A 45-minute episode, and I'm not sure we were able to agree on anything. We did, however, decide to talk about the next section while recording this episode. So sorry to say, one more episode of Tin Can Lou, but that is all, I promise. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. If you'd like to support the show, you can at any time by heading on over to our Patreon page at patreon.com/hearthboundpodcast. Sign up to be part of one of our Hearthbound guilds for some sweet swag like stickers, show notes, bonus content, and much more. We truly appreciate all of our fans and supporters for letting us have this awesome show to share with the world. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you in the next episode of Hearthbound.